Can't believe I'm having to say this, but Kansas needs to win this game on Saturday if they want to make it to the NCAA tournament.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Going on, Derek Johnson. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode wherever you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's edition of LOJ, we're going to be previewing Kansas versus Oklahoma State, a game that, if Kansas wants to keep the NCAA tournament streak going, this is their most winnable game remaining. So you better go win it, playing in Allen Fieldhouse against a team who's 500. So we'll get into that. We'll get into the Oklahoma State scouting report, headlines for the game, keys to the game, players to watch, all that and more. You know the drill if you're an everydayer. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Do that over at FanDuel. So Kansas takes on Oklahoma State, Saturday afternoon game for KU, and they enter into this one with not a lot of success in recent Saturday games for KU. They have lost 4 consecutive Saturday games, have the Jayhawks, so trying to break that streak. They've also lost 2 in a row in total, and going back to that first Saturday game that they lost to Houston, they have lost 5 of their last 8 games at this point in time. But obviously, Kansas is only 1 loss away from double-digit losses. They're a loss away from being 500 in conference play. But above all, I said after the BYU game, it is now a conversation, at least. It is a question that, what would it take for Kansas not to make the NCAA tournament? But if you lose this game, it becomes a real conversation about, okay, you just lost your most winnable game left. Ken Palm gives, a percentage chance to win for all the games remaining. It has Oklahoma State at a 93% chance, which seems high, but 74% for the at-Colorado game. The rest of the games, 55%, 16%, 56%. I think the only way Kansas doesn't make the NCAA tournament is if they lose every game from here on out. Now, maybe if they only win one more game, that would put them there, but that basically means if you win this game, I think you're going to be in a good situation where we probably don't really have to talk about it at that point in time. Beyond that, the other question here, I guess NCAA tournament streak, we're going to see how the senior day streak goes here in a couple weeks. What about the sellout streak? Is that something we need to be concerned about at all? You look at the remaining home games for KU, Texas Tech and Arizona at home, the Arizona being senior day, those will sell out, obviously. I'd assume Saturday is going to sell out. I've never really had to even really think about it for KU. I think the streak is encroaching on 400 games. It's over 350. I know at this point in time for the sellout streak for KU, I think it's going to sell out, but I don't know, that was going around the student camping groups. There were only 6 camping groups that signed up. Now, I do think that lottery was, there was a snow day and it's been -12 and stuff. So maybe that's something where the camping groups, by the time, this gets to Friday, by the time this gets to Saturday, maybe those groups will go, significantly up. That's not a conversation, but just general fan interest, right? It's not just the students. I know a lot of people are talking about selling their tickets for the game or just trying to give them away and not wanting to go. So from that standpoint, is there any issue in loading it up? Especially because the weather's going to be nice for the first time. People might just be like, let's just go, nice, 50 degrees, do something else. I don't know. I hope it's a sellout. I hope it keeps going. I think it's going to keep going. But again, in the same vein of I think they're going to make the NCAA tournament, it is at least worth a conversation now, which is crazy that we've gotten to even this point that we have to discuss it, that it is now a topic of conversation. The last one here is the Bryce Thompson revenge aspect. Now, we've seen plenty of Kansas, Bryce Thompson, Oklahoma State matchups already, but this would be the ultimate one because going back to the idea of, as long as Kansas wins this game, I think they'll be fine for the NCAA tournament. What better way for Bryce Thompson to enact ultimate revenge than by, I guess, kickstarting the path for KU to not make the tournament? That would be a pretty wild down the road, that little domino effect type of thing to get there. So you look at Oklahoma State as a team, they enter at 13-13 on the season. They are 5-10 in Big 12 play. They are ranked 102nd on Ken Palm, at least as of time of recording. They're 97th on Bart Torvik. And you look at it, and this is one of the worst teams in the Big 12, and also you are playing them on your home floor. So, it should be a game that you win. But based on how they're playing right now, nothing seems to be a guarantee. And Oklahoma State, to their credit, like you still do have 5 wins. You have a pulse. This isn't the Iowa State team from whatever that was like 4 years ago where they didn't win a single game in conference play. Even if they're near the bottom of the Big 12, which you have like Colorado and stuff like that behind them. But even in that situation, they still do have a pulse. They beat UCF, and UCF's kind of a bubble tournament team. Probably pops their bubble, but 104-95, so that gets your attention. But they have lost. Oklahoma State has 7 straight road games. That sounds kind of familiar to KU fans. Now, the personnel for Oklahoma State, we mentioned Bryce Thompson. We'll start with him. He's the 6'6" shooting guard wing, tied for the team lead, 12.1 points per game, 44% from the floor, 34 from 3, 80 at the foul line. He's just been a solid scorer for them. Has never really taken that breakout level season, but he's just been a solid player for 3 years now for them. He's coming off a 25-point game though, and in the past he has played KU well. So last year in the game at Allen Fieldhouse, he gets injured 4 minutes in, and I think he missed the rest of the season from there. So that sucked to see. But he had a 20-point game in Stillwater last year against KU. He had 17 the year before in Stillwater, and the year before in Allen Fieldhouse, he had 23 points. So he has played well against Kansas, and I kind of expect him to again here in this one. Their maybe most interesting player is a 6'8" forward in, I don't know if it's Marchelus or Marchelus, Avery. He is getting 12.1 points per game as well, 4.7 rebounds. He's kind of a big wing stretch 4 type for them that shoots 38% from 3. And nobody on Oklahoma State has more than 90 3-point attempts except for Avery. Avery has over 130 of them. So he by far takes the most threes, and he plays the 4 for them, which makes for interesting matchups versus a lot of teams. And indeed, in this game against Kansas, who has been playing 2 and even 3 big basketball. You look at the center position for Oklahoma State, 6'10", 245-pounder in Abu Usman. He is averaging 12 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, 52% from 3. He can shoot a 3, 12 of 24 from 3, so he's been 50%. That's about 1 a game for him at this point in time, but that'll be interesting to see how KU deals with that. And then there's a collection of guards for Oklahoma State. Arturo Dean, who is 5'11", 6'1", Khalil Brantley, 6'3", Jamirion Keller, and all of them average between 5 to 7 points per game, but all of them are doing it on sub 30% from 3. In the case of Dean, you're getting like over 3 assists per game. You're getting over 2 steals per game. Then you have 6'7" Robert Jennings, who's kind of a wing, who sometimes even plays a small ball 5. He fits that billing too, like 5 to 7 points per game and, below 30% from 3. And then 6'5" guard and Brandon Newman. He's kind of same in that same vicinity, but he has a little bit higher, 32% from 3. And like I said, they will play some small ball. This is not an overly large team for Oklahoma State. Now, what they do well, they might not be overly large, but they try to work that to their favor because they play at one of the fastest tempos in the conference and really in the country. Right now, Oklahoma State is 26th nationally in adjusted tempo rating on KenPom. And in Big 12 only games, they are second in the conference. So this is a team who plays fast, gets up and down. If Kansas is lethargic at all, you're going to give up easy transition buckets the other way. Oklahoma State does a good job getting to the free throw line. They actually have the number 1 rate in Big 12 games. They're also top 15 nationally in basically their free throw attempt rate. So they do a good job getting to that, which I guess you got to watch out for foul trouble there if you're KU. They're, I would say, overall nationally above average in conference play, round average in terms of offensive rebound rate. But defensively is where they are an elite defensive rebound team. They're the number 1 defensive rebounding team in Big 12 only games, and they're basically top 50 in the country when you take into account their non-con games as well. So very good defensive rebounding team. And they also force a lot of turnovers. We'll get into what they don't do well, but they do maximize the possessions. They're top 50 in turnover rate defense. They're top 40 in steal rate defense. And if you're looking at the Big 12 only numbers, they're 4th in both of those. So they clean the glass. They force turnovers at a very high rate. Now, what they don't do well, they turn the ball over a lot on their end of the floor. So even though they get them back, they're 14th in Big 12 only games in turnover rate, which is also outside of the top 250 nationally in terms of their turnover rate on offense. And a good amount of those are coming off steals and live ball turnovers that are leading buckets against them. They do not shoot well from 2 or 3-point range. They're bottom 5 in Big 12 games in both. And when you look at 2-point percentage and 3-point percentage, they are outside the top 250 nationally in both. No excuse for KU not to have a good defensive game here. They send teams to the free throw line a lot. So even though they go to the free throw line even more, they also get a little too foul happy in some of those situations. I don't know if some of that's from being undersized, that maybe you reach in and then, you end up giving a foul here or there. And then in general, the defense has not been good at defending twos or threes either. They're giving up 55% on twos. They're giving up over 35% on three-point shots. Out of comparison, Kansas this season is shooting below 54% on twos and below 34% on threes. So on average, and I know Kansas is not, an offense to write home about necessarily, but on average, Oklahoma State's defense is giving up a decent tick above what the Kansas offense is averaging from both of those areas. But still, at the same point in time, because of the fact that you look at some of the things Oklahoma State does poorly, they turn it over too much, they foul other teams. Those are things that Kansas doesn't take advantage of. Kansas doesn't get to the free throw line a ton. Kansas doesn't force turnovers. So if you're turning some of their weaknesses into neutrals in this game, and we have all these questions about, are they enjoying playing together and yada, 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 what's it going to look like on Saturday? Let's get to the keys of the game next. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into same-game parlays. So I haven't seen the spread yet for the KU-Oklahoma State game. KenPom has it at about 17, so probably safe to assume it'll be within a point or two of that. Are you comfortable doing that? Or are you going to fade it? You make that choice. You don't have to tell me. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA and the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, continuing on here with Locked On Jayhawks, keys to the game. And I should mention, normally we get a postcast out after the game. Might be a little tougher this weekend. I am on solo dad duty for some of this weekend, so might be a little later on when we get the recap out. For that one, we'll also be back with you on Monday for KU Colorado preview for that one for Kansas. Okay, keys to the game for the Jayhawks. Number one, find enough guys that actually want to play out the rest of the season with energy and effort, and at least kind of just semi-enjoy playing with each other, because it is apparent they're not enjoying playing for their coach. They're not enjoying playing with each other. They're not, right? There's a myriad of different issues for this Kansas team right now. And I do wonder, you're playing this game at home, obviously, now in Fieldhouse. How pivotal is that going to be? Obviously, Kansas has been a much better team this season at home than they have been on the road. And you have the ultimate weapon in having Allen Fieldhouse to that situation. But I guess this goes back to the question about, is it going to be a little, even if it is a sellout, is it going to be a little bit less juiced of a crowd, right? Can the Kansas crowd make an impact here to raise the energy level for this team? Because they need anything that they can get from that standpoint. And obviously, this is something that I've mentioned a lot lately, and it's not something that's really getting better, and probably not something we can expect to be better. But can it be good enough for at least a good amount of the time during the game? Because you are the more talented team than Oklahoma State, right? Even with all your struggles recently, you are a better team on paper than Oklahoma State. That's why you're going to be a double-digit favorite in this game. So if you play with even fine energy, you should win this game. But if you don't, Oklahoma State will beat you up on the glass, right, with a good defensive rebounding and at least above-average offensive rebounding. They will take advantage of, you making lackadaisical plays. They will play fast to where if you're not playing with that energy, they'll beat you down the court, and they'll get some easy layups that you don't even get the chance to stop in the half court. So can you figure that out? And if you're Bill Self, do you at this point just finally cut down the rotation? Do you? I don't know what you do, but can you find the right mix that you have been unable to find really all season long? Number two on the keys to the game: no dumb and lazy turnovers. When you look at some of the road games, Kansas has, and we talked about this ahead of the BYU game, but Kansas has had problems turning the ball over on the road, and it's maddening because they're the number one most experienced team in college basketball. You would think that would make them a little bit more immune to suffering those situations on the road. But the good news is they are better at home in avoiding those turnovers, and that's obviously where they are on Saturday. Now, how much of that's going to be accurate? Because overall, this has been a team that's been pretty good at avoiding turnovers, mainly because of those home numbers. But how much of that is accurate to the way they're playing right now, right? And where you see that kind of lack of cohesiveness as a team, where you see that lack of, coming together as a team, and you see whether it's a physical lapse or a mental lapse in the action, a lot of times that can be turnovers. I mean, we've seen a lot of just lazy passes on what should be simple passes for this Kansas team turn to turnovers, or plays where somebody's just holding the ball and then it just gets stripped and lost. Like, there have been too many of those, and you can't have those in games like this, right? And that is something that I'm worried about. But Oklahoma State is 10-3 when they force a turnover rate of 20% or higher. They're 3-10 when they don't. This is their avenue for winning this game. KU plays careless. It just kind of lackadaisical basketball, like we've kind of seen in recent games. In addition to the physical lapses where maybe you're not sprinting all out for this or that, you're also making mental lapses as a part of it. That would be the worry here. The third key to the game here is get the transition game going again. Oklahoma State wants to play fast, so play into that. Get your transition game going, because Kansas is not scoring in transition near enough. Really, all conference play, they haven't been able to figure out how to score in transition in league play after being really good at it in non-conference play. And going back to the idea they need an energy boost, you want to get the crowd going, well, what better way to do it than getting out in transition and throwing down a big dunk, or Zeke Mayo hitting a big three in transition. Like, that gets the crowd going. Now, looking into some specific numbers, Zeke Mayo is shooting 53% on transition threes in Big 12 play. That's pretty good. Still 38% in half court. That's also good, but 53%. Very fun number. Rylan Griffin is shooting 50% in transition from three. Only 6 attempts, but still, let's go with it. Also, KJ this is the biggest one here. And it makes sense, right? You think about KJ Adams not really being a good half-court offensive player, but you think about him being able to throw down dunks in transition. You see the difference here. KJ Adams in transition during Big 12 play is shooting 58%. In the half-court, he's 41%. So, ergo, the more you open this game up, the more you're willing to run and counter with the speed they want to play with and play more in transition. That's good for you, because you are not a very good half-court offense. The more you can get out in transition, even though you haven't scored as many fast break points in Big 12 play as you might have hoped, the more you can get out in transition and take away some of those deficiencies in the half-court that, again, like KJ goes from a net negative on the offensive end in the half-court to a net positive in the transition game on the offensive end, right? So the more you can do that, the better it's going to be for you. All right, let's get to players to watch next. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Finishing things up on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks with a little players to watch. Don't forget you can check out Locked On College Football and or Locked On College Basketball for your second and third listen every day. So thank you for joining us here on Locked On Jayhawks. Again, we'll try to get a postcast at some point later this weekend, but that could come a little bit later. We will have that KU Colorado preview for you on Monday, and we'll have plenty more KU basketball content coming at you. KU football getting ready to start spring ball too, so that'll be upcoming here. That we'll have an opportunity to talk about some of that stuff as well here. Make sure you're subscribed with Locked On Jayhawks. I also started a Substack. It's free if you want to subscribe. Just gonna post the occasional, thought that I think is better for written word than on here on the podcast. So it's on my Twitter page if you want to find it. I wrote a little something on KU losing by 34 to BYU and how the increasing level of blowout losses for KU has happened over this last handful of years. So again, it's free if you want to subscribe. Just wanted a little extra outlet to do some other things with around KU. All right, so players to watch for Kansas and Oklahoma State. Let's go with our player matchup. We're going to go with Avery, the 38% three-point shooting four-man for Oklahoma State, against KJ Adams / Flory Badunga. What the heck is the starting lineup going to be for Kansas? I have no idea, because it was clear Bill Self was trying to send a message with the three big lineup to start the game. It didn't work. Kansas got down big early, and, a team that shoots a lot of threes torched a team who was playing a bunch of big men out there, right? So what do they do this game against Oklahoma State? Do they go back to it? Do they do something else? Not a clue in the world. But regardless of what the starting lineup is, you're going to see times where KJ's in at the 4. You're going to see times where Flory is in at the 4, right? And so whoever it is, you're going to be guarding Avery, who is somebody who, again, has taken over 130 three-point attempts this season. That equates out to basically being like 5 a game, right? So you really got to get out there. As good of a defender as KJ has been this season, he does struggle sometimes chasing three-point shooters. And so that would be a bit of a question here. If it's Flory, like same thing for Flory. I think Flory at times has shown the potential of being this, super quick-footed big man who does have mobility on the outside, and he's had possessions where he has been able to keep up. He's still a freshman, though, and there have been other times where he's gotten lost off ball if he's supposed to guard someone for three and they get a wide open three. It's just the typical freshman mistakes that you would kind of expect, but that can really hurt you in this game. So how are they going to be able to defend him on the defensive end? The flip side to this, though, is what if KJ does have one of those lockdown defensive games and can take him out of the game? Because then if that happens, then you're really getting an advantage, because I think he is their kind of biggest matchup nightmare on the team. The other part of this, though, is on the offensive end for you. Okay, we just talked about the transition game for Kansas. Well, that's a big area that KJ Adams can make an impact in the transition game. Can he do that here? And then from the Flory Badunga perspective, right, can Flory just kind of outsize Avery on the offensive end to finish maybe a time or two around the rim and to maybe grab a couple big offensive rebounds for KU to get those extra possessions, because you're going to have that kind of big man advantage on him. So I think that's going to be a really interesting matchup on both ends of the floor. Our high on the go-off meter, when looking at Oklahoma State, they give up a lot of threes in general, but they especially give up a lot of threes from the corners. And in Big 12 play, Zeke Mayo is leading Kansas in corner three-point attempts per game. Ryland Griffin's not far behind. Both of them are within 0.2 of each other, and both of them are hitting them at essentially 36%. So a good number so far from the corner this year. So maybe you would circle either of those. Maybe you double circle Zeke Mayo, because he at home is shooting 47% from the floor, 44% from three, and 84 at the foul line. So maybe that would be a double circle for him. Maybe you would erase the circle on Ryland Griffin, because you don't know how Bill Self is going to use him and where that all sits with everything right now. The other guy that I would bring up here is, I do actually think KJ can get some big dunks in this game, maybe give you 8-10 points, which is something from the transition game. But Dajuan Harris, because I think Dajuan is somebody who, I don't totally know what I'm going to get from every player at this point in time from KU. Like, Dajuan is one of the few guys I don't really have to wonder if he's going to mentally show up to this game, I guess, point being. And I look at Oklahoma State, and even though their 5'11" point guard in Arturo Dean is averaging 2.1 steals per game, that is something you have to be aware of. You overall look at like the defensive metrics on CBB Analytics, for instance, and it has an all-encompassing defensive rating, and it gives him a negative rating. So maybe he's just kind of a ball hawking player who is going to get his steals, but he's going to get blown by a couple times because of it. So it's not an overly big guard. Like, I think that could be good for Dajuan. So I could see Dajuan having a good game here and trying to put a stamp on, one of his final home games in Allen Fieldhouse. So those would be my high on the go-off meter. I guess we'll go with Dajuan and Zeke Mayo. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe. See you next time with another edition of Locked On Jayhawks.